This is my first time recording a YouTube video. So I wanted to do a little paint with me session. So today we're going to be painting this portrait. It's a father-daughter portrait actually. And I have only sketched it and the client approved, so we're going to start painting. I'm really excited to share this with you. It's a really special piece. I usually do wedding portraits, and this actually is from, this photo that I'm using is from a wedding day, but it is a father and a daughter. This is a gift for the bride. Her father recently passed away, so it's a really special gift. And anyway, I did a little Instagram story on my art account, kind of doing a little behind the scenes, finishing up the sketch. Anyway, so let's get started. So I always start portraits off by sketching them first. I like to send a photo of the sketch to the client before I begin painting. And then once I start painting, I usually start with the skin first, since that's usually the layer that's beneath everything else. With watercolor or any other media, I usually like to begin with the bottom layer up because I just think it makes the painting look a lot neater. So I use watercolor for all of my portraits, but for skin I usually use wash. I just really like the effect that the wash has on skin. For this particular piece I'm using Winsor & Newton. And I love painting hair. I usually like to add a lighter layer on the bottom and then work up by adding some darker details on top. And then you can really see the highlights and the lowlights. With watercolor, you always add the darker layers on top, and it's usually different with other media. So just keep that in mind if you're gonna be painting with watercolor. And then because I like to do the faceless portraits, I like to add a little bit more detail in parts like this. So like her hair and her bouquet and his suit, I like to make sure that I'm adding the highlights and lowlights. And then here I'm starting to paint his suit. I have a lot of fun painting men's suits for whatever reason. I think it's because they're a little bit more structured. So they have those creases and those wrinkles that are really fun to imply into the work. And also, by the way, with watercolor, the layer that you add will always dry a little bit lighter than what you had intended it to. So you'll probably need to be layering on top of that. Same technique that I've been talking about. I usually like to add the lighter layer on the bottom, and then once that dries, I'll go ahead and add my details. Something else I've noticed is, for the shoes or for other parts of the portrait, the shape isn't always as important as the shading. The shading makes a huge difference in how your portrait turns out. Once I've finished most of the details on his suit and her dress, I'll begin working on the bouquet, which is a really fun little part. The bouquet is usually really small, so it's hard to get a ton of little details in there, but it's fun adding as much greenery and floral details as I can. And I usually begin with the greenery first, and then I go ahead and add some colorful parts of the bouquet, and then I'll go ahead and add any of the shading for the white florals. Because this is her dad, I really wanted people to see that his hair was graying if they looked at the portrait. So I left a lot of white space in the hair and really just added a few gray brush strokes. I started kind of from the bottom layer and worked on top and layered that on top. And then once we're done with all the details of the actual portrait, sometimes the client will have me add a wreath. So for this piece specifically, we're doing a greenery wreath. So the colors that I'm using are a sea green and an olive green, and I think they contrast really well together. The sea green has more of some blue and some warmer hues in it, and the olive green has more warmer hues like yellows and golds. So once again, I like to do the same thing with the wreath that I do with the rest of the portrait. I'll go ahead and put a first layer down, and then once that dries, I'll go ahead and put any details in. So if there's any branches that need to be added, or if there's any veins that need to be put into the leaves, then I'll paint those after the first layer has dried. So I'll finish painting all the little details, I'll sign the piece, and then it's done. So I hope you enjoyed enjoyed this little process video and enjoyed painting with me. If you did, I'm hoping to do more of these, and you can like, subscribe, whatever you're supposed to do at the end of a YouTube video.